Hello again. Welcome to Talent Thrives Here. Our guest today is Jan Nagel out of Los Angeles, California. Jan has held many roles in the animation industry over her career, being the leader of Women in Animation for many years. She's been a studio representative, a professor, a producer, and a host of other roles. Jan, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Lance. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks for asking. You've just come from Kidscreen, and I think one of the things that's on the I think everyone's sort of minds right now. We're in the middle of a strange time with studios where, we just came through the writers and actors strike last summer. There's potentially a looming live action strike this summer coming up, and also it seems to be that new media streams are starting to impact traditional media streams, and
Mhm.
so I'm just curious if you have any predictions at this point in time in the industry and potentially how it's changed. Give us a snapshot from your seat because you know a lot of people and you've been in the industry a long time. So I'm curious what you're seeing and what your thoughts are on the industry right now.
Well, Kidscreen was not the most buoyant, and yet we're all like little children in a big room. There were like 1,800 of us, all just bouncing around, being fun, having fun. But it was serious discussions because we're in an industry that is shifting greatly, and I think we see it from the point of view that, at least my point of view, is the big corporations took the opportunity during the strikes to kind of get rid of fluff and rethink. But they think inside the box. So
Hmm.
one of the things that I posed to everyone at Kidscreen that I met was we're a creative group. We think outside of the box where Warner Brothers, Disney, Nickelodeon, all of them are thinking inside the box. And we can see what the problems are. We need to be the ones to help create those solutions for those problems.
Right.
And I think that putting that out there created a seed. We'll see if the seed germinates and we get something out of it. But
Yeah.
as we were doing it, it created a lot of, as I went through and asked that question, it created a lot of discussion.
Mhm.
And some of it was good and some of it was just astounding. Every studio I met. And remember, I'm in a room with every country represented, every country. And the studios from India were coming to me saying, we need work. The
Yeah.
studios from Canada were coming to me, Ireland, uh, uh, France. Everyone had either something that they were trying to sell or a service they were trying to, seats they were trying to fill,
Yeah.
uh, the projects to fill it with their seats of people. And it wasn't the most, you know, joyous room we were ever in.
Sure.
But I had an interesting conversation. We kept hearing AI, AI, AI. Well, yeah, AI is here. It's not going to go anywhere. It is going to affect the industry, but let's go back to 94
Mm.
when we had CGI.
Right.
Oh my
Right.
God, CGI is going to kill the industry. We're not going to have.
Sure.
That's how women in animation started. We were worried about the art of animation. But look
Yeah.
what CGI did. It
Yeah.
took animation from being like a 5% of the entire entertainment industry to what it is today, which I think is really well into 30% of what we see entertainment wise,
Right.
especially on the children's side, but also on the family and adult side.
Yeah.
So for
It's
yeah.
interesting you say that because I remember at one point where I live, where a lot of the colleges have been trade colleges, and also they were at one point sort of building up folks to go into mining and natural resources, and the mines started to close, and
Mhm.
there was this money from the government set aside for certain job streams that were no longer as busy as they used to be. So there was this creation of digital grants, and the
Right.
colleges started building out software training and all and everything to do with whether it's graphic arts, desktop publishing, animation. There were all these new streams, and they needed instructors who knew how to use the software and teach the software. So it was kind of a boom in the sense a whole new ecosystem started. And to your point, a lot of jobs were created that hadn't existed before. There was an old guard that were the hand done classical trained animators, And some of them made the jump to new tech and some didn't. Some mustered out. Some became head of storyboard for places because they could still draw by hand. And, storyboard was, I think, boards were one of the places where you still needed that. But even that started to digitize eventually over time. So it was a huge shift. As you mentioned, it was a great big shift. So I'm curious with, again, the changes going on now, if there's something we can't see, because there's, a legitimate anxiety around a lot of things that are going on right now in the industry. But I wonder, I jokingly have said to a few people, I'd love to have that hot tub time machine. Go forward 5 years in time. What does the industry look like in 5 years? What can we not see right now? Where is it going to evolve that we possibly can't see right now? So I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, I think AI, if we can control it, which I think we can, because there's such a fear about it,
Mm,
I think we're going to see it move the industry faster. I mean, look at
right.
animation, unlike live action, is a long process. A
Yes.
movie is over 18 months. I mean, that's just the animation part of it. The
Yep.
story, some of the pre-production is like 2 years before they ever get to
Right.
move any characters.
Yep.
I think it will make things go faster. I think that was, in 94 when Disney said, we're going to make 2 animated films a year. Oh, how could you do that?
Right. Right.
Um, it is one of those situations. I am not fearful of AI. I think AI is actually going to be good for the industry.
Yeah.
Where I'm fearful is what is our Generation Z and Generation Alpha
Yeah.
going to view, and how are they going to view it? And the irony is, we heard this over and over and over again. Oh, yeah, AI was the topic all the time.
Mm,
YouTube,
right.
unboxing, influencers, all of these were a topic that was a subtext. Nobody mentioned it as a threat
Yeah.
until I heard one person mention it as a threat. It was a Canadian studio. And they said that, they've got a lot of content on a certified uh, YouTube channel, but they can't make any money because
Right.
of the advertising restrictions for children. Then I
Yeah.
was sitting down and I gave my, spiel about we're a creative group, inbox, out of box. And I had someone from Colombia next to me. I had someone from India next to me on the other side of me. And I brought the topic up, and the guy from Colombia had rushed over to me to say, Jan, I really want to do YouTube content, short content. I really want to do it. And I go, you're not going to make any money on it. And
Right.
the other gal from India, she said, oh, yeah, that's all my daughter watches. And this guy said, John says, my son is not watching animation on YouTube. He's watching unboxing
Right.
influence. And
Yeah.
she said, and Verinda said the same. And
Yeah.
we looked at each other and I said, how old are your kids? 6.
Right. Wow.
I said, we're losing the children at 6 years old. They're
Yep.
going from what we put them in front of a big screen, and now they're going to the small screen short
Yes.
form.
Yeah.
And that is really the problem. It is not AI.
Right.
It is how do we build those audiences? How do we monetize those audiences?
Mm,
YouTube, short form YouTube has been around for now almost 20 years.
right. Right.
Smosh was something that was, more adult, and it was a way, this goes back about 10 years. Lenora Hume headed up that. And, she was encouraging and helping young animators to develop new content, new stories, and put them up to get audience.
Yep.
In turn, I was working with a studio that also 10 years ago called Smash Bits. They made all their money in short.
Hmm.
And he was out of Kentucky. He was able
Yeah.
to hire a lot of talent out of Kentucky to make it. And once he took his eye off the prize and didn't keep feeding the machine wasn't feeding him, so to
Right.
speak.
Yep.
So we have to figure out how to monetize those.
Sure.
Let's say a short form animation could cost maybe 60,000,
Hmm.
but you're only making 6 grand off of that.
Yeah. Can't survive.
You
No.
can't do it. So if we want to talk about what the big issue is, it is how do we get the eyeballs to watch? How
Yeah,
do we keep the eyeballs there? Now, 20 years ago, we were losing eyeballs. Girls would watch up to about 11 years old, and then they'd turn on Hannah Montana because they wanted to see fashion and they wanted
sure.
to see relationship. Boys would stay on till 13, 15, and
Yeah,
ever. But now, if we're losing them at boys at 6 years old, what's going to happen?
right, right.
So that was the revelation that I saw at Kidscreen. That was a revelation when I am sitting here with somebody from South America and somebody from Southeast Asia
Yeah,
and hearing the same story out of both of their mouths and they're comparing it.
yeah,
It
yeah.
says this is not just a problem that's happening in North America, it's happening worldwide.
No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. To your point, I think we've discussed it too. The idea that if you see, a young family in a restaurant or something like that, and they have a child and they're trying to have an adult conversation with friends, they quite often put a phone or a tablet, a small tablet with the 5, 6, 7, 8, 10-year-old, and that person is now in the tablet. They're in their own little world. Um, and it's amazing how powerful that when we were kids, the television set was the thing. There were no computers, and then it became, I think, flat screens in people's houses. I got a 50-inch TV now and this sort of thing. But I don't know if anyone could have predicted that. I'm sure some of them did, but that we would be watching content on a 6 or 8 inch appliance, rather than needing this cinema theatrical release, that whole feeling of big is better, IMAX. Think of these large screen formats.
Yeah, well,
Who
think about it for a second. One, we had 2 years of not being able to go to a theater,
Sure, sure.
right? So, and our kids were all isolated looking at what I'm doing right now on Zoom, and that
Right.
was their education for two
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
So that generation, and these were definitely our alphas,
Mm,
they lost the habit of going to see the big films. If you
right,
notice the last couple of years, the big animated films have just not made the box office
right,
that they once did because people are still hesitant to go into the big theater.
right,
And some of it's COVID and some of it's not COVID. It's just they got out of the habit of doing it.
right. And
Where
don't you think, Jen, the other thing is it'll be on streaming in 8 or 10 weeks. You know what I mean? I think there's that element of like, do we really want to get all the kids in the car and spend $85 at the theater, or do we just wait 2 months for it to get its streaming release? You know what I
And
mean? And
you can pay $12.99 and get that movie, and the four of us can sit down and watch that movie.
right, right.
You
Yeah, the
know, the family can
distributions.
watch it.
Yeah,
For where we'd have to pay $12.99 a ticket
yeah,
times four, times popcorn,
yeah,
times drink, times dinner out, times
yeah,
all of that. So
yeah,
yeah, there's a whole shift also in that.
yeah.
And but you have to I was thinking of something and now I lost the thought, but it had to do with the small screen.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what it was. 20 years ago, I attended a seminar and I had a flip phone. And at that seminar, they said, this is going to, this, the phone, is going to be revolutionary. You're
Right.
going to be able to watch movies on it. You're going to be able to watch television on it,
Yeah.
sports on it. I'm going, I have a flip phone. How am I going to do that? And they said, but this was the greatest equalizer. They said, this device will be a great equalizer. It is going to go into low income housing where people
Right.
will be able to obtain content. It'll go into areas where cable can't go.
Yeah.
So, like South America, where the Andes, you just can't put wires around.
Yep.
So, this is going to be a revolutionary device. That was 20 years ago.
Right. Right.
And look at it today.
Well, to your point, John, I remember being in Cuba. There were no cell phones allowed. It was, illegal.
Yeah.
And then Castro got sick. His younger brother took over, and I went about 2 years later. The whole island had cell phones,
Mhm.
and it was sort of really a dramatic shift in whether your resorts or the smaller towns and villages. everyone had a phone. And I thought, wow, that was a fast shift. Like, and I remember when years and years ago when the BlackBerry, from RIM,
I had a
you know,
BlackBerry.
yeah, and I was talking to head of marketing at University of Toronto, and he just come back from India, and he said people were saving money for months to get a BlackBerry, like it was a status symbol in some areas of India, and he said the BlackBerry took the Indian market by storm, like it was just gangbusters once they finally got their hands on it. He said it was everywhere. Um,
Because
you know,
infrastructure costs nothing. It was a cell tower here
yeah,
and a cell tower there. They were not running cords anywhere.
yeah,
And, I remember hearing once that before, when they were trying to test GPS and Wi-Fi, they did it in South America going all along the Andes
mm,
because there was no way that South America could ever have wires. And this goes back like
yeah,
40 years.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the US went down there and they put in these cell towers and were
right,
able to start providing communication devices
yeah,
without wireless.
yeah, yeah. A total game changer, right? Total game changer.
Total game changer.
So I'm curious right now, going back to the industry for a minute, the pivots, because I've heard things like 30 to 40% of people in the traditional animation and VFX world are sort of out of work right now. And it does seem like studios are starting to land. There's more bids out. The industry is starting to sort of get back on its feet a little bit after recovering from the strikes. But everything I'm reading out of Hollywood says they're not shooting the same uh, quantity of shots or movies or television shows. It really hasn't revved up fully at all. It's sort of a shadow of, and I think from what I've been reading and listening to is that this potential strike this summer uh, with the live action crews is another thing that studios are being very conservative right now. And, plus what we've just discussed with the distribution model shifting. So I'm curious what you've seen from different folks that you're talking to, whether it be Kidscreen or just through all of your other connections. What are people doing right now to stay busy, and what are they doing to pay the bills?
They're doing whatever they can to pay the bills.
Right.
Uh, we're still in that unemployment insurance stage for some of them
Right.
because it's only been in the last few couple months where people have been. I mean, DreamWorks laid off a huge amount. Disney, to yesterday, Paramount announced that they laid off everybody with Noggin. There is at every level, there's been layoffs.
Mm.
But soon there's going to have to be some turnaround. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the people that are on the creative side are taking this opportunity to actually create new content so they
Yeah.
can have it prepared, ready to take out to pitch. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be very important. I know that right now, as a teacher in a college, and I teach career for animators,
Yeah.
uh, you know, I say internship. There will
Right.
always be internships right now. It's
Yeah.
low cost to the studio. It
Sure.
has high return for the studio. If they hire anybody again, it's lower cost. It's a win-win for everyone, and that's keeping them alive. I
Right.
think also I was just seeing something today. An animator was talking about how to survive, and
Mm.
this individual's been unemployed for 11 months.
Right.
And she was very keen. Her name was, I can't remember her first name, but it's Culpepper, and her last name. And she
Great
said,
name.
I'm creative. I'm
Yeah.
going to take my creative energy and figure out how I can use my art to create an income. I don't want
Right.
to be a barista again. And I think everyone who is in the creative industry is going to use their creative energy to find another path to create an
Yeah.
income, whether
Ye-
it's
Yeah.
pottery or whether it is,
Sure.
doing something, doing graffiti. They're going to find a way
Yeah.
to find income because they have the tools to do that.
Right.
It's different if you are an accountant.
Yeah.
If there's no money coming in, you can't account the money, right?
Yeah.
But if you're an artist, you can find other ways. You can
Right.
do you can build something on Etsy or
Yeah.
Shopify. or something like that.
Well, you know what reminds me of Anne is, sorry, Janet, the actors, a lot of actors I know also like renovate homes. So if they didn't have an acting gig, they were doing drywall somewhere, they were doing electrical, or, you know, they were sort of general contractors, a lot of them that I have known over the years. They always
And
had a
know
second.
a lot of them too, and they've actually worked here.
There you go. So there's often like a second or third, you know, set of skills that they can employ. Um, and it also reminded me recently of when I graduated university, like, you know, back in the Stone Age. I had 5 part-time jobs for about 3 years. I was just hustling anything. Like someone said, you know, we need a waiter. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. Bartender, sure, I'll do that. And then magazine, we need someone to lay out pages. Oh, I can do that. And they're like, we need someone to be a photographer at this. I'll take the camera. You know, I was just trying to string together enough stuff to pay the rent. And a lot of time it wasn't an 8 hour day. It was 4 hours here. And then I go at a night job and do 4 hours in that. But eventually it sort of simmered down to 3 part-time jobs, not 5. And then one of them was just a lucky accident. I walked into a graphic studio that was building signs for a client of mine she was sick. I was doing all the layout for the signs and she took them to the sign place. She went in a hospital. She said, can you go get the signs? And I got there and they weren't ready. So I took my coat off and I started helping the guys build the signs. And they were like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm late. You're late. And this doesn't look unbelievably hard. Let's get it done. And, you know, but maybe 45 minutes later, the owner came in and said, who are you and what are you doing in my studio? And I said, I'm a client. These things are late. The grand opening for the store is tomorrow. These need to be installed like now. They need to be installed yesterday. And so it was hilarious because she said, what else do you do? And I said, well, I lay out newspapers and magazines and I take photography and I'm a graphic artist. And she said, can you start tomorrow? And I said, what do you mean? She said, I need someone to run that computer in there and keep the shop busy. I need a small studio manager. Can you do that? I'm like, yeah, sure. And so, you know, just by the lucky accident. And so that's what I'm hoping too for a lot of people right now is getting out there and doing a bunch of things, hustling. A door might open that you can't even see, right? And that
Well,
job turned into a full-time job and then launched a whole bunch of other stuff. But it was if my friend had never gotten sick, I wouldn't have been in that position, right? It was just a lucky accident, you know.
no,
And
networking now is more important than following up on any postings that are job postings that are there. And
yeah,
I have an intern assistant. She's been with me and she's a hustler. She's taking care of dogs and
yeah,
she's editing some podcasts and she's working on some other things on a comic book. And
yeah,
I said to her, okay, you have access to my entire database.
mm,
Why don't you tell me who you want to meet with for
yeah,
informational interviews and I will help set it up. And she's already done 2 and
great,
she's going to do more. Whenever I can throw her some, work, I do. And she helped
yeah,
me tremendously for Kidscreen, which she helped organize me, which I needed.
yeah,
But networking and this gal Culpepper said the same thing. Networking is vital, and I've
yeah,
always said that. I have a story. I taught at USC once in their MFA animation program, and I had a student assistant, and
yeah,
she really wanted to be. Her work wasn't that great, but she kept saying, "How do I get a job? How do I get a job? How do I get a job?" And I said, contact everybody here at school, contact everybody that you know that you've met, just keep contacting and
yeah,
email me.
yeah,
Jan, it's not working. It's not working. I contacted 12 people. It's not working. It's not working.
right,
Do it, keep doing, keep doing. And
right,
by the 3rd month, I get an email from her. She said, I got a job at Sony. And she
wow,
said how it happened. She contacted one of her fellow students who was interning at Sony. They had just posted they needed a production assistant that
yeah,
morning.
yeah,
And she said, who do I need to meet? She ran down there and met the person who was hired.
right,
That got her on the road to doing animatics.
yeah,
That is, the hidden jobs are still there,
yes,
very, very
yes.
much.
Well, you know, to the point when you say hidden jobs, it always reminds me because I talk to, as you do too, students and people are new in the industry, and they say, "Well, I didn't see a posting for it." And I'm like, "No, apply anyways,"
Yeah.
because some places have a what they call an ATS applicant tracking system. They have a database, and and it will flag you and tag you, you know, animator or a storyboard artist or modeler or 2D or 3D. It and it will drop you in their database. So when they go looking, and I had this when I was studio side, I had a team of recruiters working with me at a few places, and a producer or somebody would come down the hall and say, "Hey, I need 3 of this and 5 of this by next Friday. Like, find them."
Yeah.
And sometimes to post the ad, we were so busy. I thought, "Oh, we'll post the ad tonight because we'll have time at 6 o'clock at the end of the day." But right now we're busy. We've got meetings and we've got the teams on phone calls, and so. Um, but what we would do before the end of the day was go into our database, look at who we know, and start the emails out and the phone calls. Hey, we got a gig starts next Friday. Are you available? Are you available? You know, bang, 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 bang. Start the outreach. And by the end of the day, sometimes we close the job. So there was no point in posting it at 6 o'clock tonight because we filled it. So my
Yeah.
point to a lot of people is whether you see an application with that title or not, send in your resume. Some companies don't want that, but some don't care. They'll file it, right? So now you're in potentially another, 20, 30, 40, 50 databases. And if it's like what I experienced, you might get a call just because you're in our database, because we'll do a quick scan, animators or must know Toon Boom or must know Maya, right? And the software spits out a list of those folks, and then we just start calling them. So, I
Exactly. Well,
often tell people, just get in there.
thing that happened to me in studios, because I've helped recruit in studios too. Rhythm and
Yeah.
Hughes, we went from 350 to 600 in 4 months.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
had to really hustle to get these people in. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I did when I was in studios and we needed people, I just walk around the whole studio and say, we need to
Mm.
fill this spot, something similar to what you're doing. Do you know somebody?
Yeah.
Sure
Yeah.
enough, they all had a friend who needed work,
Yeah.
and that person they wanted to work with. And they
Yeah.
weren't going to give me anybody bad because they didn't want to look bad.
Right.
We always
Right.
got quality people by doing that,
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
walking around the studio itself and let the people that are working there give us leads to new people to come in and fill the spots we needed.
Right.
There
Right.
was no conflict, no competition.
No, no, you're absolutely right. And I've been in studios where we have referral programs where you'll get it was funny because a lot of places they've been like, if you bring a friend in and they work out, we'll pay you 200 or 300 or whatever, some bonus for bringing it, because it helped the whole studio. It helped the show, it helped recruiting. And I remember I've been at many places where we have these programs, but not a lot of people really utilize them. Occasionally, we're paying out a few $100 for this or that. And there was I think it was a CG supervisor started at one studio, and he saw this thing, and the studio he'd been at did not have this referral program. And he came in with spreadsheets full of all the people he knew and said, like, hey, are these people in your database? Because I'd like to flag them as my people. And I think we paid him out like $2,500 in the first year. We were hiring a lot of his people.
I
And
didn't have to pay anybody out because
yeah,
the win on this, the
yeah,
win-win is one, you don't have to pay for the posting.
yeah,
Two, you get somebody that the other people know and want to work with, so
right.
you've already built your team. And the third is the person is qualified. And
Yeah,
yeah, I've seen the hiring bonus situation,
sure.
but when you're in a real small studio, there's no need for it. But what they're doing is bringing in their friends, so it creates the party. And to
Oh,
me,
absolutely.
if you can
Yeah,
create the party atmosphere and have people work and be productive and still have a good time,
yeah,
it's a win-win for everyone,
yeah,
you know. So, and
yeah,
also, I say this and I lecture all the time. It is the person that's sitting next to you in class, it's the person sitting next to you in the studio. These are all your friends. You could know Steven Spielberg, you can know all the, Pete Docter, you can know them all. They're not going to hire you
right, right, right.
next to you that's going to coattail you in to anything. And they're the one who will hear that there's a lead for a job opening. They're the ones
Yeah.
who will recommend you. They're the ones that you're going to talk to and complain to. I don't like my job. They're the ones that you need. Peers are so important.
Oh, I'm with you 110%. I always say that like 90% of your job, your next job will come from someone you know.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
for all the reasons you just said, they'll refer you in, friend of a friend. I was just doing some staffing for a couple studios the last few months, and it's exactly that. Every good hire we do, the same thing. We said, we need two more people that know Unreal as an example. Do you know anyone that knows Unreal experience? And most of the folks, if they're having a great time, be happy to hand you names and phone numbers and say, "Oh, I'll call them myself right now." Um, so and it is that whole network is so vital, so critical to what we do. It's so many studios have been built exactly as you said, like Rhythm and Hues. That's a perfect example of having to ramp up. Um, so I'm just curious. About I know we're going through a sort of strange time, but some positive notes. Uh, any predictions for the future? I guess how are big studios going to pivot? What do you sort of foresee might be some of the changes coming? With this other generation coming up that's more attuned to phones and YouTube and influencers, and how do big studios creatively kind of get in front of that? I guess would be the big challenge for a lot of them.
I think we're already starting to see a little bit of it. You
Yeah,
take a company like Moonbug, who is, does mostly short content
yeah,
on YouTube, and
yeah.
now they're going into the big screen.
Mm,
So the hope is that they take the audience from the small screen onto the big screen. I think
right.
once the uh, big corporations wake up and see that the small screen is where the eyeballs are right now,
Yeah.
they're going to make the effort to start creating the short form content
Hmm.
that will build to become the big screen content and drag the viewers into it. I
Right.
also think that we're going, everybody is looking for that holy grail of, oh, we need something that has legacy. Peanuts being one of them is a good
Mm,
example of that because you have a built-in triple audience. You've got multiple generations and they want to turn their children onto it. I think we're going to see that, but I think we're going to see it in a different way. I think because all of our animators are going to be forced to do things like ebooks and comic
yeah.
books and graphic novels, I think we're going to see that when those get latched on, so to speak, by the
Mm,
viewer, by the audience, I
right.
think we're going to start seeing more of that coming to the big screen. So we're going to see new brands that maybe we haven't seen before. I think there's a lot of fatigue with
Mm,
Marvel and all the older brands. I mean,
right.
really, we've seen it in the box office and we're seeing it in other ways.
Right.
And
Right.
once the studios stop worrying about profitability, they will become profitable.
Mm,
Right now they want a guaranteed
right.
win, and there's not always a guaranteed win. And when
Mm,
you start allowing the world to bring their creative to audiences, um, you're going to find that there's going to be new brands, new ideas, new legacy properties that are going to develop in the next 10 years.
right. Yeah. I wonder too if we'll see, to your point there, traditionally, if you had a big pitch and you pitched 8 or 10 studios and they all said no, you're sort of out of luck. I have this feeling, the democratization of the tools now, because I just had a friend in earlier. I'm doing podcasts, she's doing podcasts, totally different businesses, but it's now like a consumer level marketing tool that you can go on Amazon and buy all sorts of lights and tools and cameras and stuff quickly. uh there's professional grade, but there's an awful lot of stuff much cheaper that can do the same quality, or enough to get it out there. So I'm curious about that, like a bunch of, again, creative people. I think even Steven Spielberg, when he started, there's some hilarious stories about he was just shooting his own movies, and then I think he started sort of just walking in on the set all the time
Well,
at the
the
studio.
story is that he figured out at Universal how he took the tour and he figured out how to get in. And at that time, it was fine. And he just would walk through the gate and say, "I'm visiting Mr. Wasserman" or something
Right,
like that.
right.
And he found an empty. He had a briefcase with his lunch. He found an empty room office with a working phone. And
Yeah,
he sat
yes.
there all day long. And every day he'd come in, and the guard kept saying, "Yes, Mr. Spielberg. Yes, you make." Finally, some executive came by and said, "Who the hell are you?"
Right,
And
right.
he said, "Well, I want to make films," and that's when they gave him that film with the, I can't remember the name of it, but the one with the runaway semi truck,
Right, right, right.
and that's how he did it. That was plucky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's the joke for me is always that's the George Costanza story, right? Just keep showing up till someone
To get to
realizes.
the job, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
I knew a guy who wanted to be a writer producer. He drove limos for a living. He was very picky about who he would drive for, and he always
yeah.
had a script that he could hand to the back seat.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and
No, yeah.
the pizza box with the script in it. That's another one of those old ploys that has been.
Yeah, yeah, no, similar. I remember taking a limo to the airport one time, and on the trip, we were discussing what, the driver was telling me what he did back home, and was born in Greece, and he was in media and broadcasting, and I said, "Oh, I help recruit for studios," and exactly what you said. As I got out and he handed me my luggage, he handed me a couple scripts that he'd been working on. And said, if you can find me a door that opens for these, it'd be great. So but I again, going back to your point earlier, I think that creative people will potentially look at, 3, 4, 5 avenues to get, they've got all this creative juice in them. It's got to come out, right? They've got to be able to use that thing that's in them. That's, it's like a wild beast. It needs to be harnessed. It needs to get out in some way, shape, or form. And I do believe that with this sort of ability to get, home broadcasting and this, whether they're content creators or people, the tools are readily available. We could self-publish now. And I do desperately remember, the early 90s where desktop publishing came out. And
Mhm.
uh, I was in college at the time taking night classes in graphic design. All of my instructors were people that used to lay out like the Christmas wish book, like the big catalogs, because the retailers had hundreds of people on staff to do it by hand. They would build a Christmas catalog, but it would take all year in production to get it all ready. And as the desktop publishing started, and now we had all these Quark Express and all this PageMaker and all these programs coming where you could build a magazine at home, or Corel Draw was another one.
Yeah.
It was like the big printers and the big art departments started to cut bodies because they didn't need all those people to do that stuff. A lot of those folks had fundamentals of graphic design and knew how to lay out, and they had the eye, and they'd been doing it for 25 years. They became the college instructors who were trying to still teach the fun. Anyway, long story short, I remember going in and I knew how. I'd been at a magazine for a few years at university, helping build the college newspapers and stuff. And once all the instructors found out I knew how to drive a Mac, they were all over me. Oh, come down here to the lab. We've got 6 of these new computers. We don't know how to turn them on, And so I was in there like their technical assistant. But it was an interesting bridge because they were phenomenally talented artists. And so we started to sort of barter, like, hey, if you can teach me this, I'll teach you that. And so it was a good economy for me at the time because I really wanted to quickly get through a lot of the course material, and I had some content that they wanted. They wanted, instruction on the software because they said, look, I don't know how any of this works. I've never had to do this, and they had picas, and they had a foreign
Oh,
language to me. They were
I have a
talking,
pipe bowl still. I have
right?
a pipe.
There you go. So they had this, older technology, and so we did a swap of technology, and again, I learned tons from them on how to lay out things and the balance, a 2D balance on a page and things like that. So I'm hoping that whether it's AI and all the other sort of distribution and media channels shifting right now, that there's something that hopefully I'm optimistic that's going to be created that we possibly can't really nail down right now. It's going to evolve over the next few years, and hopefully whatever comes out on the other side is quite positive and creates again another wave, because I do think, I think we talked about it earlier, like AI is going to probably speed up a lot of things that normally were more labor intensive. So it'll shift some of the labor, but I still think content needs to get created. And so if it's getting created faster, again, back in the early 90s when this impacted, CGI impacted movie making, the ability to make movies faster was what happened. It wasn't, we're going to make the same number of movies just quicker. It was, no, we'll make more movies. So I wonder
Yeah,
if,
well,
you know,
and we have to also look at today's appetite. with
Yes.
streamers and everything else, the appetite is huge. The
Yeah.
faster we can produce, the better. Will AI take over the creative form of it? Maybe we're fearful of that, and that's what all these strikes are about.
Right.
However, if we can harness AI, it's going to be
Yeah.
a tool that will speed up the process so
Yeah.
that we can a studio can make 6 feature films a year
Right. Right.
instead of two. Or
Well, the other thing during the pandemic that was so, well, even before, I guess, was binge watching, where you could watch a whole season in a few days or a week or so rather than wait for the next episode next week. And conversely to that, I've been starting to watch Monsieur Spade. I think it's on AMC where I'm at. And and so I saw the first episode and then I realized, oh, good goodness, the other ones aren't available yet. I'm gonna have to wait a whole week to see a second episode. I thought, I don't know if I can. It hit me like, oh, this is the way we used to do it. And so now I literally, have a chunk of Sunday night where I'm waiting for the next episode. And I thought, I'm actually enjoying this. I have to pace myself now rather than, I'm just going to binge watch the second and third season in a minute. So yeah, there's potentially some spots where we could slow down, but I do think a lot of the general public now loves to consume quickly. And I think that also helped the streamers ramp up the last several years because they realized people want their content immediately. They want to be able to, wait a few weeks and then watch 5 episodes in a weekend and things like that. And it's, so yeah, it's, again, I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful that we get to a different place. This is a rough year. It's a big reset for sure for a lot of people, for a lot of studios, for a lot of economies. But I'm quite curious to see what happens, a year out or so and that sort of thing.
I
Well, Jan,
agree.
I'm conscious of the time. I thank you so much for being on the show. I'd love to chat again at some point down the road. Hopefully we can get together for another call. If somebody needs to reach you, I know, Jan, you are available on LinkedIn. Is there any other way? Do you have a website or somewhere they should contact you, or is LinkedIn good?
I have a website and they can email me through the website. It's Entertainment Marketing Diva,
Right.
a lot of letters there.com.
Excellent. Great.
Entertainmentmarketingdiva.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again for your time. It was great seeing you and great chatting with you and catching up. And hopefully we'll talk again more soon.
Thank you for inviting me, Lance. I appreciated it.
You're very welcome.